All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Ordinance Subcommittee, and the date is the 26th of September at 5:30. And public speak. Nat, do you have anything you want to?
No, I'm just here to listen.
Okay.
Hope something gets done with the bicycle ordinance, so that's why I'm here.
That's going to
Public hearing.
Yeah, it's all set. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still here.
Very good. Well, you're welcome.
So let me just make sure. So bicycle ordinance, I got all organized over the weekend. So bicycle ordinance, where is that on here? It's not on here.
We're hearing it.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Yeah.
There's a public hearing Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Correct.
Got
What
it.
day is it? Thursday?
Today's Thursday.
Okay, good. Got it. Okay.
Thursday?
Today's Thursday.
Yeah, today's
Yeah.
It is
Thursday.
next
No, next
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yep.
For City
Correct.
Council.
Yes.
Yep. So let's get caught up to where we are.
Wage theft? That's a public hearing.
Let's talk. Yeah, we have wage theft as a public hearing.
So I think I forwarded you guys the most relevant recent stuff. Basically, their lawyer's talking to our lawyer, and I called Lisa Clausen on my way here, and I'd spoken with her. Well, she left me a message a few days ago, and basically that's kind of where we are, is waiting for them to come to some sort of decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we think we'll have the public hearing then? Probably not.
I didn't know this was going to take this long.
And do we want to? Have you talked to Barbara? Do we want to keep I don't think there's a problem with continuing it necessarily.
I don't.
Is there a problem with removing it without prejudice, and we'll get back?
Or we wouldn't even have to remove it without prejudice. We could just
send it back.
Send it back to committee
and hold on to it.
And hold on to it.
I don't necessarily
right.
have a problem with it, because I kind of feel like at this point it's getting a little silly.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought that we were going to have this done 2 meetings ago, so I apologize. I mean, a lot of it was out of my hands. I did not anticipate this.
Is it like so?
Yeah.
Why suddenly that name didn't sound right? Had some changes, and so now they've gone back to her or their attorney, and then he's either yaying or naying it.
Yeah. So there were some issues, like I had mentioned, where so it's interesting. So yeah, there were some issues where I think we were basically, the way the legislation was written, it looked like we were basically making recommendations to the executive that's not in our power to make. In other words, like how
we are directing the executive branch.
Correct. But then it was interesting too, because it sounded like the carpenter's attorney, as always, interpreted certain things that our attorney was interpreting differently. So whereas Attorney Tanner said, I don't know, I'll have to look for examples, and I apologize, but there were some places where they differed, and there may have been some, like in the TIF section, there's discussion about enforcement, and Attorney Tanner was concerned that we didn't lay out a plan for enforcement, but their attorney felt that the enforcement was basically already in place with the state, and that we were just basically creating a framework for referring it to the state for enforcement. So I'm just waiting for them to get together. Yeah. They you know, sometimes it sounds like certain things are the end of an ordinance, like where he said that the diversity requirements were a quota, and all we had to do was change one word for the guidelines, and all of a sudden it's great.
Yeah. Well, we ran into that with signs a lot, you know, but even though, like, currently our sign ordinance is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
And planning has been working on that for, but it literally took us 2 years to work on the sign ordinance, and we sat at this table and hammered it out for 2 years.
What is unconstitutional? Well, it's not on our agenda.
Right.
Okay.
But you know, so that can happen.
So that's where we are. I mean, so my only question would be, let's say we took it out and presented it back to ordinance, and then like the day afterwards. I mean, I guess I'm not in any rush at this point. I thought for some reason, initially I thought this was going to apply to the school, and mostly the school. It's not. So without any big projects on the horizon, I mean, whatever you think is kind of the best process.
Well, I think just to maybe clean it up a little bit, to send it back to committee so it's not sitting on the public hearing agenda.
That's fine with me.
And I'll talk to Barbara about it too, just to make sure that it's not going to you know, if they're advertising requirements and we've already done it and it makes more sense just to keep continuing because it'll save us money, then I'm fine to do that too.
Yeah, I think in practice it doesn't matter,
Right.
because at the end it gets back. The only problem then is then we have to wait till a council meeting to reset the public hearing. But again, I'm not, you know, I thought this was going to be done like 2 months ago.
Right. So cannabis.
Yeah. So
This is lots of news this week.
oh, you mean with delivery and
Yeah.
and yeah, I haven't had a chance to dive
And
into
the
that
Social consumption and
Yeah.
delivery.
yet. Correct. Yeah.
And it looks like both of those things are going to be specifically earmarked for equity applicants. Did you hear that?
I didn't hear that specifically, but I heard the two things of it. I am not a big fan of delivery. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and tell you.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a big bridge to cross for me.
I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I initially, I think the biggest problem right now with, and this is on the agenda, so we can talk about it.
It is on the
Yeah.
agenda. We
I
can talk
think the
about it.
biggest problem right now is the cash basis, and I think delivery wouldn't be a problem.
I feel like I just saw something about legislation just went through for cannabis banking.
Potentially, yeah, I saw that too, on the national level.
Yeah,
too,
national
right?
level.
Yeah, so if that gets squared away, I think that makes a big difference with the fact
Right.
that they'll be carrying 20,000. So did you get? I spoke with the chief about this week,
Okay.
and I think the mass chiefs have some concerns, and like at the
Well,
end
they
of
have
the
concerns about everything cannabis.
I know they have concerns about everything cannabis, but I think this is a place where, like, I think that.
Well, did
I
they
wanna
read the
listen.
regulations? And because literally they can't. It's it's kind of like a Domino's driver. They can't have They're gonna have to wear body cameras. They're
Yeah,
gonna have
but
they have to have a safe.
Okay,
They-
but why do you need cannabis delivery?
What if you don't want to drive? You know, like.
I think it's
I
something
mean,
for us to
why do you
talk
need
about.
pizza delivery?
I don't think that's.
I mean, it's absolutely the exact same thing.
Well, they
I
should be done
disagree.
like,
together.
if you
actually.
can go get pizza, then
Disagree.
then why should you have it be able to be delivered?
Pizza is not regulated in the same way that cannabis is.
I mean, why don't we have beer delivery?
Right.
That would be great.
I agree with you.
It's the same concept.
Here's at the end of the day, I talked to our chief. He doesn't seem to support this right now. I think that I'm not saying I'm like 100% against it, but I think it's a discussion to have. And if there's significant safety concerns, especially for the drivers, I want to hear it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but it did seem from what I read, it seemed like a lot of those issues were mitigated at the state level through the regulations that they were.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, too, I mean, like, I think we should sit down with our chief law enforcement officer, and if there's things that we could do more on the city level that would make him happy, it's
Right.
something I'd want to talk about. But
Why do we need to do it right now?
We don't.
Don't we have enough going on?
well, I agree
No.
with you, especially
You
if
know,
we're talking about
like-
expansion
like,
of
I-
brick and mortar.
Yeah. I would rather to see social consumption like in a cafe setting.
Mhm.
I would rather spend calories doing that.
Sure.
And that other one, if we run out of things to do,
Yeah.
then maybe we start thinking about delivery of cannabis.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that, but and I also don't. I feel like we could walk and chew gum at the same time, and I think that
Have you met us?
for, here's my thought. I mean, and I'm not invested necessarily in delivery. My initial thought is there's people that don't feel comfortable going to the dispensary because they don't want to be seen.
Right.
B, there's people that are they're medical patients, and they want to be able to, either they aren't physically able to leave their house, or it's a hardship for them. B, there's people that maybe don't have vehicles or don't have access to vehicles that allow. So I mean, like, there's a lot of things where I can say, well, there are some pieces that make sense to this.
Mhm.
And then there's some pieces that could be, factors that would make it prohibitive. And I think those are the things that we'll have to weigh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this just came out this week, so.
Right. Lot of discussion.
And for as far as social consumption, I think that that's something that is going to be really interesting to see the rollout of, and there's going to be a lot of concerns. But I think it's a pilot program right now.
Right.
So,
Right.
and
Correct.
cities have to be willing to be ready to be a pilot community.
Yeah, yeah.
Which, you know, from day one, I'm saying we should get on that list.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's a conversation to have. I agree with Councilor Conniff that I'm personally more invested in making social consumption work right now. I think that for me, what I'd love to do is, actually, let me backtrack. Commissioner Heidel offered to come to an ordinance meeting and present to us about all the new regs and brief us on it.
That would be great.
We can get that to happen at some point, but.
Because it's standing in our agenda that we
right.
All things cannabis.
All things of cannabis are we can discuss.
So she's happy to do that.
Great.
I'm sure like right now things are a little crazy with this stuff, but
yeah.
she said she'll do that at some point. And then, but I think also we should have Chief Alberti here to talk about his concerns. And I spoke to him recently. I don't know if there's a compromise, but I mean at least that's a place where I definitely think we need his input. And,
yeah.
But.
So where are we at with our social equity?
I mean, I think it's basically done. So, because of the way it was formatted, and we have a million different versions, I started to try to get a document together. Every time I did it, formatting got totally screwed up. So here's what the nuts and bolts of, and I guess, well, I have a few. I'll give you the presentation, and then there's a few questions to ask you guys.
Okay.
So the nuts and bolts of what we're doing are, we're adding two definitions, basically. We're adding the definition for Easthampton equity applicants into the definition section, and then the attorney pointed out, and I don't disagree with it, basically, even though it's implicit, a definition for what a non-equity applicant is. Okay, so that's basically one change, one amendment in section 10.10.3. Okay, then we're revising in section 10.10.4 place, basically everything beyond 10.10.4.4, which is where you start with how many there are and all of that, and that whole portion is revised.
Crossed it all off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have the document kind of like starred things because there's so many. I didn't want to delete the attorney's comments either in the master document I have. So that's one. And what I was thinking of doing was just kind of like. And then actually, sorry, I keep sidetracking. I'm going to finish what I'm saying and then tell you what my thoughts are.
Okay.
And then the license requirements, basically that whole section gets changed. So the question would be, would we want to present this to the council as the bits and pieces, to this section, add these two definitions to this section, add to 10.10.4, add these from here on out. Do we want a master document with everything in it and then just highlight the new stuff, or do we want to just give them the amendments?
And what the attorneys did was they did the entire document.
They did the entire
versus
ordinance.
What we were just
right.
Yeah.
Right,
Just the
that
one
wasn't.
piece.
That's a whole bigger fish.
I think if we were gonna, unless it's typos, if there's anything, any sort of material changes beyond the equity stuff, that we'd have to go back to the planning board.
Right. So my thought was to take our current ordinance and type out the amendments we made, which I could literally do tonight and send to you guys.
Okay. Which Barbara has requested that.
Yeah.
For tomorrow.
I could do that tonight.
Or tonight, or as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Because today is normally the deadline, so.
Yeah, I could do that tonight and just because that's all it is. Now, the only thing, I changed a couple small things that I want to run by you guys because at the attorney's questions, yes.
I'm sorry. So you're going to redo 10.10.4.4?
Yeah, I'm going to basically say, to Barbara, take our current ordinance, add these two definitions.
Which are the two definitions?
The two definitions are what the equity applicants are.
This whole thing he crossed out and this 10 point, yeah.
It's within the definitions
and then
in
it's
10.10.3.
all this changes that he has in here.
And then, yeah, and then after 10.10.4.4, that, including that part and thereafter in that section, is all changed.
Including 0.5, 0.6, 0.7?
No, I mean within that,
Just
that
10.4.
subsection,
Okay.
yeah.
10.10.4.
And then 10.10.7.4 license requirements, that whole thing gets replaced basically. Some of it stays the same, but because of all the numbering, the whole thing just gets replaced.
It just gets replaced.
So I was just gonna say, here are the changes, put them in. And there's just a few things I needed to ask you about that we need to still figure out that I could put in later. Does that make sense so far?
So far?
Okay. And maybe then she could highlight or asterisk the actual changes.
Was it 10.10.7.4.4?
10.10.7.4, yes, point.
License
point
requirements.
4,
But
yeah,
not
license
all of
requirements.
them, not 1, 2, and 3.
Correct, 1,
Just-
2, yeah, all the
Those are all
subsections.
good.
All the
That whole
subsections.
section.
All of them need to be changed?
That whole section, because there's little
Oh, niggling
grammar
things.
changes,
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, the whole thing. Okay.
So one thing we already voted on is 10.10.7.4.3. We changed the 6-month thing to 1 year for the,
Yes.
and we changed where it said city clerk to city planner.
Yep.
Now, one question they had was, what Attorney Tanner said was that there needs to be some sort of process, and I don't remember if we talked about this last time. Like, you can't just say, oh gee, like, we couldn't get our stuff together, can we have an extension? Like, is there, even if it's informal, like, you know, the applicant shall submit a time, I'd like
A letter of explanation, I think, would be.
Is that all?
I think that's all. That's all we
need?
because I mean we don't need to get into the specifics of it, because I think within the letter of explanation the planner would be say, you know, in that letter I would like to see, you know, the reason for the delay, your plan for execution, but I think for the purposes of the ordinance, probably a letter of explanation would be fine.
And that's reviewed by the planning board, right? That would go to the planning
Yeah.
board and they review it?
Yep.
All right, and need for an, okay, so within there somewhere, I'll find a place to basically, hold on, I'm just looking at this. Oh, but it says with a written explanation of the
Yeah.
entity's failure to submit a completed application to the commission.
But
So if you think that's okay.
I think that's fine.
He seems to think we need something more. I don't know what more would be.
I think more would be on the administrative level of the planner's office.
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I don't know like how we can make this a formal thing. Like,
Yeah, I mean, because like we'd have to literally have a document attached.
right.
You know, which is.
So then basically it stands the way it's written, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
Unless
I'm fine
you
with
could
that
think
too.
of some sort of formalized process. Councilor Conniff?
Yeah, that's totally fine. I'm just trying to follow the comments.
I know, it's hard.
It's like a maze.
And then the only question then, so right after that, where it says an Easthampton equity special permit shall lapse, it should be any permits. Well, an Easthampton equity permit shall lapse upon any change in the ownership or control of holder of an Easthampton equity special permit. So his question there was, should an entirely new application be required, or should they simply have to? So in the case that someone buys a dispensary,
yeah.
so they have to submit an entirely new special permit.
I believe they would, yeah.
So should they have to submit an entirely new permit, a special permit application, or would it be a review by the planning board?
I think it would
And do we have
be.
anything similar in place now where it's?
Well, yeah. I mean, and so what would be similar would be like a bar. And I don't think they need, if a bar is changing hands,
Don't they just buy the liquor license?
they have to transfer the liquor license.
Okay.
So with the ABCC, so there's that. But and I think that they would, it's like a review of the special permit. I don't think they have to apply for a brand new special permit.
Okay, so how would we put this together? Because, so for instance, if someone took an equity spot, they purchased it, they have to prove that they fall within the equity requirements.
Yeah.
So would it be something like, I don't know.
They would have to renew the special permit, providing proof of their equity status.
What if they are no longer an equity person?
Then they would lose their special permit.
Yeah, they would.
If it was under
Even
equity.
after they open their place?
If an equity person, so if an equity applicant got a license, opened a place, and then sold it to a non-equity, it would lose its special permit.
So the non-equity person would have to start at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if there was any licenses available, they could go for one of those,
Yeah.
but they couldn't get
Otherwise,
an
they'd
equity.
have to get it back. Okay.
And at that point, they'd probably come to the city council and say, hey, can we have...
We need an extra.
So I'm just typing something I want to read to you guys. And so they would have to go through a whole new application?
I believe, yeah.
Okay.
An Easthampton equity special permit shall lapse upon any change in the ownership or control or holder of an Easthampton equity special permit.
So I'm just typing it. The new owner shall provide proof of meeting equity criteria for new special permit application as outlined in section 10.10.4.6, and must submit a new special permit application to the planning department.
Yeah, I think that.
Which one do you want again? 10.10.
So I am on 10.10.7.4.4.
Oh.
Sorry. So I think right after, so within that same section, when they say it lapses, we could just add that then.
Mm-hmm.
So it currently reads, an Easthampton equity special permit shall lapse upon any change of the ownership or control of holder of an Easthampton special permit. And then I would move to add, the new owner shall provide proof of meeting equity criteria for new special permit application as outlined in section 10.10.4.6 and must submit a new special permit application to the planning board.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the form of a motion.
Are we changing?
Well, we're adding that part to it.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I'm gonna put this in here. So that was one of his questions. And then, hold on, let me just put this in the minutes.
Plumbers came today from a new kitchen.
Oh, they're lucky.
We have a leak.
Oh, no. Unlucky.
Thanks for nothing.
Okay, and then the other question was, so, the extension process, we went over the new application. Oh, what was this? I have to put a note in for myself, and of course don't remember where that was from. Sorry. Oh, where it talks about adding, like reviewing for licenses, where this is going back up, sorry, section 10.10.4.5, under place. The City Council Ordinance Subcommittee shall review the appropriation of cannabis retail special permits every 2 years. And his comment was, it's unclear and has no real teeth. Need more information on exact time for review and procedure for review. / recommendation to full council to follow. So I guess the question is, like, do we have to say every 2 years every May or something like that, or like a certain specific time that we have to review it by, and then how, you know, if we say, well, we should add X amount of special permits, I mean, it would have to go to the city council, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think creating specificity, but also what happens during that review? Like,
Yeah, like
we
how
just
do we
go,
determine?
oh, we've got 6 and 2, awesome, we're done.
Right.
Should it be involve a meeting with the planner or something like that to determine? I mean, I don't know what the criteria would be.
Why would we want a review? To make sure that they're all in good standing? To make sure that we have enough to see what the queue length is for the upcoming ones? So what's the why?
That's a good question. And didn't we talk about this with the planning board? Like, can't we review them anytime we want?
We can review them anytime we want.
So should we just take that
We
out?
could take it out, and you know what? One of the reasons why I think we should take it out is, or we should just change it to the city council may review. But I don't like if Tom. I think Tom wants to reorganize committees, so I mean there might not be an ordinance subcommittee.
Yeah, that's gonna happen. There's gonna be a cannabis subcommittee.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So
It's
that's-
a special.
Well, because we could
Joint
do,
committee.
I mean, because I guess any time, at any time, we can submit to the agenda a review.
Anytime.
Right? So,
Yeah.
and
Anytime.
you don't even have to say the city council may because they can anyway.
They can anyway.
So why do we have to say what we already
I don't
did?
think
So
we do.
It's yeah.
I
It's
would-
implicit. That
Yeah.
It's part of our job to do
'Cause-
that.
and even
anyway.
if we said every 2 years, someone could submit an amendment to that saying we don't want it to be every 2 years.
Right.
So,
And we could do it like as needed.
And I also
Right.
feel like if we're gonna put it in, we need to say what the review is, and this
Yeah.
way, not putting it in, the review can be whatever we want it to be.
Yeah.
so just take that out.
I
Yeah.
think taking that out makes sense.
Strike 10.10.4.5, strike it.
Strike it.
Well, just
Well,
that
strike
first
that part.
sentence.
Okay, so
Yeah.
there's
So.
the city, just that very first sentence?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because non-equity applicants, special permit applications will be considered in the order which they get them.
Mhm.
For equity applicants, special permit applications will be considered in the order which the planning department receives a completed special permit.
Mhm.
He asked a very interesting question, which I added an option for. What if, so in regards to the order of reviewing applications, what if an equity applicant applies to a non-equity spot? In other words, do they get
Priority review.
correct?
If they're not going for an equity
Yeah.
license. I would say, why wouldn't they go for an equity license?
Well,
Because
what if
they
say
wouldn't be
one's
able to sell it.
unavailable?
What if we don't have any more?
So say a non-equity spot is available and they want the, like, so currently equity applicants can apply and don't need the state, they don't need the completed state application to be
Right.
considered. Whereas a non-equity does.
Right.
So an equity applicant, someone who fits equity criteria who wants to say randomly say a business closes, and I address this actually later on, I'll mention this to you too. So like say a non-equity place closes, so you have a non-equity spot open. Can an equity applicant apply and kind of at least get some of the benefits of being an equity applicant in the sense that they can apply and be considered by the licensing board without the state, with the same benefits that they get as if they applied to an equity spot.
I would say if that was the case, then the fair thing for that in that situation would be for that license to become an equity license, which then would bind it by all the other kind of rules around equity licenses.
So that was another question. So if a non-equity spot is lost, so someone closes their business, do we reapportion that? Because that was the question, and I was like, well, we could, but I'm trying to figure out, that could get messy.
Well, I think we would reapportion it if, so someone who has a non-equity license goes out of business and that license becomes available, and an equity applicant applies for it, then I think that license should become an equity license. If a non-equity applicant applies for it and gets it before, if there's no then it stays a normal license. a non-equity license, because, and my reasoning behind that is, if I was an equity applicant applying for a non-equity license, then if it wasn't bound by all the same rules and regulations, I would get priority and have an expedited process, but then I could turn around and sell it to a non-equity without any restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
So then why make any non-equity? Why don't we make them all equity, and whoever goes, and if you don't meet the criteria, you just keep moving as if it's a non-equity? Because to me, it feels like if I'm an equity and we don't have any equity licenses, and I go into the other line, I am now, in theory, taking a license away from someone who may already be in line, and I get to jump the line.
Mm-hmm.
And then not be bound by the restrictions that we put in place.
I know, but I just don't. I mean, that doesn't seem fair.
No. Well, I mean, I think.
So someone who meets equity criteria, if they apply for a non-equity spot, they have to
Follow
the same criteria for non-equity.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it.
Okay.
Like, I don't think they should get, if 3 people are kind of working through their process in a non-equity way, and I come over and go, yeah, I don't have to do any of that, boom.
Jump the line?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't
And I would
feel
say,
right.
I mean, and that definitely doesn't, but if there wasn't anybody in line for that license,
Mm-hmm.
and they were able to just get it, I feel like they should be bound by those regulations.
You could. I mean, then you have to talk about how we reapportion spots. That was the question, which we could certainly talk about.
I mean, because they could all then eventually kind of switch over and become equity licenses.
Or it could be more equitable,
Mhm.
right? Because we have 5 and if we have 5 and 3,
Yeah.
It could
like
become 4 and 4.
correct. But I guess the question would be, yeah. I mean, and I'm down with that. We just have to figure out how to make the language.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm thankful that the attorney brought this up because I wouldn't have thought about this. So to go back to the original thought, though, an equity someone who meets equity criteria and they're applying for a spot that's not equity, and let's say for some reason it wasn't going to be reapportioned.
Right.
They have to apply under the same guidelines as a non-equity applicant.
I would say probably, yeah.
Yeah, because I could see a lawsuit.
Yeah, I would not imagine that they would be able to jump the line ahead of someone that's been in line.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be fair.
Could there also be an argument made that I am working on getting my finances, I'm technically not in line yet, and somebody comes in who gets, I was planning on it because I wasn't rushing, because it's non-equity, so I don't have to worry about anybody taking it away, and then suddenly it gets taken away.
But if you haven't, if say you're just
But
holding back getting your
maybe
financing.
you don't have to, because you didn't think it would become a non-equity,
Mm-hmm.
and now it is, and you miss out, and boom, you're down.
But
And I get it, you're not in line yet, but
Yeah.
it just, I don't know.
well, I mean,
It feels kludgy to me.
but I think if you have your paperwork submitted, then and for a non-equity and you're a non-equity applicant, that is your position in line. And an equity applicant I don't think should be able to come in and bump you out of line if there's no equity licenses
So they become
available.
second in line,
They would become second in
and
line.
if there are 2, then you're saying first guy gets it, and the second person coming up would get the second one. And it would become an equity license by virtue of the fact that this entity is getting it, not by the way we're categorizing the license. It's who's getting the license.
Mhm.
So okay.
Making your head hurt.
It does.
Well, that happens sometimes.
So the real question is right now. So let's say this happens and we have 5 and 3.
Yeah.
If one of those 5 is closes or something like that, you technically have another special permit open. Are you saying that should move over to 4 to create, or do we just leave it there?
I think we probably
I think it should stay there until
Probably.
someone grabs it.
probably leave it there, but it's up for grabs for an equity applicant.
Well, sure, it's up for grabs for anyone.
Right.
But I mean, but we're saying that an equity applicant really isn't an equity applicant. Like, they don't get any special treatment.
If they go for a normal license, I think we would have to.
He's saying they should have special.
So here's what I'm saying. I'm saying that if we have one non-equity available, and nobody is in line for that, and say the other three, equity ones have people that are in line for those,
yeah, then
a fourth equity applicant could apply.
Oh, of course they can.
For that, and if there's nobody in line for it, they could get the benefits of being, in order to be equitable, get the benefits of being equitable. However, they would be bound. It would transfer that license into the equity column. And if they gave that up, then that one could go back into the non-equity column, but they would be bound by the regulations of the equity column. For example, so that person gets a non-equity license, but they are an equity applicant, so they get fast-tracked.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would be bound if they wanted to sell it to somebody. They wouldn't just be able to sell it to a non-equity person.
So, I get what you're saying. I think the problem is you'd have to basically say it gets reapportioned before they apply. Like, you wouldn't be like sitting there and like whoever gets to it first, then we make a decision what happens to it.
It's like, I think that what happens to it is by virtue of who applies for it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It does, but I don't even know how we'd write that. Yeah.
So, you could just have like a non-equity license that is open, can be applied for by an equity applicant. However, that license will be bound by the regulations of 10.4.5 or whatever.
So really, we're saying an absolute of 3 equity licenses with the potential of all 8 being equity. Theoretically, the way you're talking about.
Yep.
If nobody non-equity goes for the non-equity, we know they have, but
Right.
if they don't, and a fourth equity comes in, we can give them one of these. And then a fifth comes in, we give them one of these.
Yep.
And before you know it, all the
All
eights
of
are
them
over
could be
here,
equity.
and there's 0 over here.
But then you can't transfer it to a non-equity applicant. Ever.
Right.
I don't-
But then, but if that license became available again, it would go back to a non-equity. It would just be a standard license that anybody could apply for.
I think they should.
If you-
No.
Do you know what I mean?
But not the way it's written right now.
Not the equity ones.
Yeah.
So
but,
it's 3 equity. They got a big E on them.
Yeah.
And they will forever have an E on them.
Mm-hmm.
I get one, I don't have it anymore. The next person who gets that one that I had has to be an equity.
Has to be equity.
I'm over here, I was 4th, so
Yep.
now I'm over here. I have a non-equity license, has a big N on it.
Yeah.
I decide, I get all the benefits of it. So it's technically an equity, but it's still got an N on it.
Right.
And now I'm getting rid of it.
Right.
It goes back to being non-equity. It's forever and ever a non-equity license. So I'm done with it as an equity person.
Right. Then it goes
The
back.
next person, it goes back into this bucket.
Right. If you give it up.
If I give it
But
up.
you couldn't sell it. If you're an equity applicant, you can't sell it to a non-equity.
Oh, for the love.
yeah, I think that's complicated.
It is complicated, but
And I don't like that answer either.
Why?
Like, because it feels very, if it's Monday, it's this, if it's Tuesday, it's this. It's gotta be very concrete
But it's
from a
not.
lawful perspective.
But I
could
think
see
it
a
is
lawsuit.
because what we're doing is
Honestly.
so like if you take away the N's and the E's.
Well, then I don't know what we're doing.
Right. So, but if you just think about the license and you have an available license that an
Yes.
equity applicant applies for.
Yes.
And they have a preferential process that allows them to move through, for good reason.
Yeah. It magically becomes an equitable.
Well, but it's not an equity license. They just get the benefits of the equity application process.
That's what I
Right.
was thinking.
That's what I was asking.
The
And that's
license
but if you-
stays in this
it's
column.
yeah, correct.
But you get the benefit of the process.
Sure, but what and the reason why this is getting convoluted, I guess, is because I think that if you get those benefits, you shouldn't be able to just because then I could be a professional business starter as an equity applicant, and then sell it to another. I'd go for a non-equity, get these preferential treatment, and then sell it to somebody who's non-equity.
Well, you could because it's not an equity license.
That's what I'm saying. But
Yeah.
I got preferential treatment.
Well, the only preferential treatment you really get is you get planning, you get a local application completed without the state level.
Right.
But that's really it.
Right.
You still have to do all the other stuff.
It does save time. I mean,
You still have to get the state license eventually.
I don't know. I
I mean, the answer is you keep, there's a wall between the two.
Yeah.
And never the twain meets.
right. You either apply as an equity or you apply as a standard.
The only question would be in the way the provisions currently written now is the goal is to get to a 1-to-1 relationship.
Mhm.
So if we currently have 5 and 3, if one of those 5 closes, could that be apportioned over to make
to-
it 4 and 4, and then from there on out you add
It's just
1 and
then-
1?
I think by ordinance we could do that.
Well, and I think that's, isn't that the way we wrote it?
Yeah.
Well, it is, but by addition, not by reapportion.
Oh.
And-
So you
and
could
that
write
would
something that
change.
special payments may be reapportioned when surrendered in order to
Balance.
balance,
Or just say the balance of equity versus non-equity can be altered by ordinance at any time.
Mm-hmm.
It's 5-3 now, it could be
4-4
4-4,
tomorrow.
4-3-5.
Mm-hmm.
And it would take an ordinance
Yeah.
/ act of God.
well, so because we have it, the city council amends this ordinance such that additional cannabis retail special permits are authorized. Those additional special permits must be issued in such a way that no non-equity special permits are available until such time as the number of Easthampton equity special permits equals the number of non-equity cannabis retail special permits. So you could say that this, something like to the effect of this process,
Can be done by reapportioning.
may also be performed by reapportioning if a special permit is surrendered.
Yeah.
Is
That's,
that okay?
I think that's good. Because that, and,
So it's 5-3 out of the gate,
yeah, and so then if one of those comes back, it could be just moved over to 4-4.
or conversely, could an equity become a non? I mean, it could go either way. We could, or is the movement only to make it equal?
The movement's
not
to make it equal.
Less equal.
So that what would theoretically happen is if one of the non-equity closed, an equity person, then it could be reapportioned.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'd have 4 and 4, and then the way it's written after that, you just keep adding
Just
1 and
keep
1
adding 1 and 1.
forward.
Okay.
So it only really, this would only
It
technically
never
happen
goes-
one time.
And
Yeah.
it never goes this way, it only goes that way.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it can't go that way. It has to go towards,
More equity. Equal.
Balance.
Yeah.
has to.
Well, it has to, because we feel that it has to.
No,
It
but
doesn't have to.
I feel like the way that that's worded makes it sound, at least to me, that in order to add a new non-equity ordinance, non-equity license, there has to be parity between the equity and non-equity. They have to be balanced.
Yeah, and I think, so this would technically only happen once.
Right.
So I just wrote this sentence. This process may also occur by reapportioning surrendered non-equity special permits.
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay?
I think that's fine.
Okay. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is section 10.10.4.7 as I read it, and I described up to the point where it says blah 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 until such time as the number of Easthampton equity special permits issued equals the number of non-equity cannabis retail special permits issued, and then I'd like to make a motion to add right after that, this process may also occur by reapportioning surrendered. Is surrendered the right word?
Or just like unused maybe.
Unused.
Well, no, they were used and then given up. They
Yeah,
were
that-
used.
Not currently.
That's why I used
Available.
surrendered. Well, available though, because currently there are 5 available. We're starting with 5 and 3.
Right.
So the only way that this would happen is if someone took one of those 5 and gave it up, and then it would.
Is that 5th one spoken for?
No, I'm not sure, because if it weren't, oh yeah, no, the 5th is spoken
It
for.
is, okay.
The question is about the 6th.
Oh.
So my thought would be that basically we're saying it's there right now as we wrote this.
Right.
But if someone took it and then gave it up, by surrendering it, it puts itself available to be moved over to equity.
Okay.
So,
Before you make the motion,
Yeah.
maybe you're in the middle of the motion.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Okay, you had mentioned when you started talking 10.10.4.7.
Yeah.
I have, that's where you can only be 200 feet.
Yeah, that's what I had to.
Oh,
So,
am I in the wrong place?
I got it was
10.10.4.7, I'm sorry.
Oh, there's another.
4.4.
4.4.7, oh, there it is.
Is it?
I know.
It's in place.
Wait, 4.4.7.
It's, oh, because it got, you know, there was some problems with, has to do again with the formatting of, so this might be that might be 6 for you.
10.10.4.6?
Yeah, just look right above that. Is that the one if the city council amends?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there was some formatting and it's unclear where one of the paragraphs belongs, if it belongs together with, yeah.
Okay. So repeat what you were going to say, I'm sorry.
Oh, just basically, just so it talks basically about how if special permits are added, how they're added, and they're added in such a way that to create equality and equity, and following that, a one-to-one relationship, and then following that, it's added basically in a one-to-one ratio, but
Up to a limit?
well, I mean, the limit right now is 8. Like, if we were to add more, they'd have to be done. And like, let's say we pass this, so we have 8. We have 8 special permits.
5 and 3.
5 and 3. And let's say in 2 years we're like, oh, we want to add more licenses. Well, the only way we could add is they would have to be added to the equity side until that's a one-to-one ratio.
Okay.
Yep.
But if one of those 5 we're saying now is taken and then released or surrendered, whatever word you want to use, well then it's fair game and it moves over. It gets
It moves over. Yeah.
But again, that can only happen once because then you have 4 and 4.
Then it would be 1-to-1.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was kind of.
I think that's good.
All right, and then again, the language I was considering was this process may also occur by reapportioning surrendered non-equity special permits.
Yep.
Okay, so in the form of a motion, I'd like to add that to that section after where it says the sentence that ends the number of Easthampton equity special permits issued equals the number of non-equity cannabis retail special permits issued.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let me just put that in the notes. Sorry, I just want to make sure this is all covered. I think that might be it. Let me just put this. Sorry, I'm just jumping back and forth. I think that was those were the.
I'm just.
Drumming.
Jump.
I think that was it.
So before, so I think one of the things you were asking before how we should submit this.
Right.
So I think what would make sense is to have a finalized copy, and then on a cover sheet highlight the change, like just like a little snippet of each one of the changes, and maybe have those bolded on like the document beneath it,
Yeah.
and so that people can see right off the bat like what's different, and then but also have access to the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that way we can just, and they don't have to be separate motions or anything.
Right.
They just, but that way everybody will know exactly what we're modifying.
Yeah. So I think.
And we will have to go back and fix the rest of it.
Right. So what I'll do is I will make a duplicate then of the current markup of the markup from the attorney. I'll take that duplicate.
Revision of the revision.
The revision of the revision, and I will not accept all of the changes he recommended for the things we weren't talking about.
Right.
I'll leave that all out.
Right.
And I will accept and change the things we talked about, and I'll send it to Barbara tomorrow.
Perfect. I think, yeah.
And bold all those sections.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I could do that.
Cool.
Good.
And I think as far as that goes, as far as the rest of the kind of recommendations go, I think what we should do is maybe just have a meeting
Go one
at
by one.
some point in the near future. We'll just go through it with red ink and go one by one through it. And if there's any material changes that aren't like grammar or just like
grammar.
Yeah.
so, and all the grammar stuff we can just do.
Right.
And that's easy. We'll just sit down with it, and if there are any big things, what we can do is we can kind of talk to Jeff and see what he thinks about either sending it back or showing them and getting their approval, not having it necessarily go to a joint public hearing together. If it's not, substantive changes, I think that would probably be fine.
Okay, and like I said too, I don't know I think I said this, at the current time, the mayor is not allowing us to expend any more resources on the solicitor with this, so I can't say if the changes we made are going to be okay with him, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean,
So and then going back to, he had expressed some concern about the categories we're choosing, but I don't know if you talked about this last time I forwarded to you. But the commissioner mentioned some issues of that. And she seemed to feel actually the more expansive we made it and less narrow in terms of who qualified, that the less we were creating like a reverse discrimination type of thing.
Yeah, I don't even know if that is going to come up necessarily. But if it does, it might make sense to have that letter available.
I sent it to everyone. Okay. And I think where he was referring to, I sent one to everyone too, because he was referring to these as quotas, and she didn't seem to understand why he said it was a quota.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will do this tonight and send it to Barbara, and do I send it to Joe too, because it's technically now not, like it's too late for an agenda submission, or how do I do that?
Yeah, he'd have to approve
it. Right?
Yeah. I mean, he'll be fine with it, so just CC him.
Just for the purpose of procedure.
Just CC him.
Okay, and yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Good.
Watch both of you yawn.
It's a long day.
So we added that stuff, and then we'll place in full document and submit to clerk and council president. Right? Okay. All right. Yeah, it should be pretty easy to do.
So then we will have, pending any changes, public hearing on equity, public hearing on bicycles.
Yes.
Yep.
Ow. And then wage theft.
We're gonna. Well, I'm gonna talk to Barbara
and see. I thought. I was actually surprised by some of the stuff that came up, but I have to say that the solicitor does a very thorough job.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting how every single lawyer seems to disagree with another. So,
that's true. Yeah.
Motion to adjourn?
Yep.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Great. Are you guys going to the cat?
I think I would like to.